The Rockefeller name in the United States is like ink on paper. The harder people try to scrub it out, the wider it spreads. To some, the family represents discipline, innovation, and the kind of system building that helped shape modern America. To others, it symbolizes concentrated power, cold, controversial, and wrapped in secrecy. But if you strip away the labels, the real question is simpler and far more interesting. Where did it start? How does a child raised with scarcity end up constructing a business empire large enough to leave fingerprints on a nation's history? And what lessons remain once the legend is removed? A childhood built on pressure. John D. Rockefeller was born in 1839 in rural New York, the second son in a family that didn't have much. Early on, he learned that life doesn't negotiate. His mother, Eliza, was strict, deeply religious, and relentlessly practical. She trained her children to treat money like a responsibility, not a luxury. Save first, waste nothing, and account for every expense. Even as a boy, John kept careful notes of what he spent, building the habit of control long before he had real wealth to control. His father, William, was the opposite, a drifting, unreliable figure with a reputation that made people uneasy. He traveled for long stretches, selling questionable miracle cures, then reappeared unexpectedly with cash, goods, and a shadow of debts left behind in local towns. He wasn't a stable provider. He was a storm that came and went. Lessons taught the hard way. William didn't just hustle strangers. He turned his own household into a training ground. He would lend money to his sons, charge harsh interest, demand repayment without warning, and force them to find a way out. The goal wasn't kindness. The goal was to sharpen instincts, think fast, negotiate harder, and never assume security is permanent. John didn't admire the cruelty of it, but he absorbed the logic. From his father, he learned flexibility and the uncomfortable truth that business often rewards the ruthless. From his mother, he learned discipline, restraint, and endurance. Those two forces, cunning and control, formed a foundation that would later scale into something enormous. The scandal that left a mark. In 1849, the family was hit by a public shock. William was accused of sexually assaulting a household servant. Instead of facing the allegations, he fled, leaving his wife and children to carry the shame and consequences alone. John was only 10, but moments like that don't vanish, they harden. It's easy to imagine why he began leaning more heavily into his church community after that. It offered stability where his home life didn't, and it likely reinforced a private vow that would define his trajectory. If the world is unstable, you build a structure so strong it can't be pulled apart. That's the starting point most people miss. The Rockefeller story isn't born from comfort. It begins with pressure, financial, moral, and social, and a child who learned early that survival belongs to the disciplined, not the hopeful. Every Sunday, when the collection plate made its way down the pews, John's mother made sure he put something in it, even if it was only a few coins. Over time, he began to associate faith with giving, and giving with obligation. One pastor even put the idea into a sentence John never forgot: "Make as much money as you can, so you can give as much as you can." Looking back later, Rockefeller would describe that moment as a kind of blueprint, an early framework for how his entire life would be organized. Not long after the scandal around his father cooled without a clear verdict, William Devil Bill resurfaced as if nothing had happened. He moved the family to Cleveland, selling it as a fresh start. It wasn't. John soon realized the relocation had a darker purpose. His father had been living a second life under a false identity, and Cleveland offered cover. Then, like clockwork, William vanished again, leaving Eliza alone with 5 children in a new city, forced to stretch every dollar and every hour. John didn't have the luxury of a carefree adolescence. In 1855, at 16, he secured a junior bookkeeping job at a produce brokerage in Cleveland for 50 cents a day. It was small money, but it was a doorway. From the start, he behaved less like a teenage employee and more like a person who treated numbers as law. He checked invoices line by line, flagged errors others ignored, and obsessed over tiny discrepancies. That habit, relentless precision, became his edge. Outside the office, the same discipline continued. He tracked his personal spending with the same seriousness he applied at work, recording even trivial purchases. For him, accounting wasn't just paperwork, it was a form of control. The ledger became a second conscience, quiet, strict, and always watching. After a few years of earning modest wages, he had saved a meaningful sum. Then he took a loan of $1,000 from his father, predictably, with interest attached. Rockefeller wasn't borrowing because he trusted his father. He was borrowing because he understood leverage. Money could be turned into momentum. At 18, he entered business for himself, beginning with practical trade, meat and grain, work that rewarded reliability and logistics more than charisma. But the real inflection point arrived soon after, when a new industry started pulling the country toward it like a magnet. In 1859, a commercial oil well was successfully drilled in Titusville, Pennsylvania, igniting an early oil rush. Crowds poured in chasing the most obvious prize, drilling and striking crude. Rockefeller saw a different bottleneck. He believed the real power wouldn't belong to the gamblers punching holes in the ground. It would belong to the people who could refine oil efficiently and move it cheaply. So in 1863, he partnered with Maurice B. Clark to launch an oil refining business in Cleveland. The location mattered. Rail connections to the oil regions meant lower transport costs and smoother distribution, advantages that compounded fast in a market where timing and margins were everything. The refinery began to profit, and Rockefeller doubled down with a level of commitment that bordered on obsession. He borrowed aggressively, sums that would be worth millions today, not to show off, but to expand capacity and reinvest while the industry was still young and disorganized. At the same time, he continued to tie wealth to duty. Even when he wasn't rich yet, he donated. As his income grew, so did the scale of his giving, especially to the church community in Cleveland. Whether it was conviction, strategy, or both, the pattern stayed consistent. Earn, measure, reinvest, and give. By 1865, his partner Clark wanted to slow down. Rockefeller refused. Where Clark saw risk and uncertainty, Rockefeller saw an opening. He chose expansion because he wasn't building a comfortable business. He was building a machine. After deciding his partner was holding the company back, Rockefeller bought out Clark's share. Then he pulled in fresh capital from his brother William and other relatives, turning the refinery into a family-backed engine. The growth was immediate and brutal. Output climbed, margins widened, and within a short time the business was operating on a completely different scale. By 1870, Rockefeller wasn't thinking like a refinery owner anymore. He was thinking like an architect of an industry. He orchestrated a larger move, combining multiple refineries into a single organization that would become Standard Oil. That merger wasn't just a big deal. It was the first solid foundation stone of what later became the Rockefeller Empire. Standard Oil didn't win because it drilled more oil than everyone else. It won because it ran business like a science. Rockefeller treated every step, production, refining, storage, shipping, pricing, as a system to be measured, optimized, and controlled. Costs were tracked obsessively. Processes were standardized. Distribution was engineered for efficiency. The company moved with the precision of a machine while competitors were still operating like independent workshops. But efficiency was only half the story. The other half was market control. At first, Rockefeller often approached rivals with a cooperative pitch: align with his standards, join the structure, and share the stability. That was the soft offer. If they refused, the approach hardened. Some competitors were bled through sustained price pressure, long, exhausting battles where only the lowest-cost operator could survive. Others were swallowed through buyouts. And when a company wouldn't sell, Rockefeller's network made it difficult for them to keep functioning. A major weapon was logistics. Standard Oil built a transportation advantage by locking in preferential deals with railroads, agreements that gave the company lower rates than its rivals. In the early 1870s, Standard Oil secured arrangements with major regional rail lines that effectively reduced shipping costs enough to crush competitors who couldn't match the math. In a business where transportation could decide profit or loss, that advantage wasn't a perk, it was a chokehold. And Rockefeller didn't stop at freight rates. When pressure needed to be increased, Standard Oil used its purchasing power and supply relationships to make life harder for outsiders, tightening access to key inputs, limiting storage options, and controlling critical infrastructure in ways that raised competitors' costs and slowed their operations. The results were rapid. In Cleveland, one of the refining centers of the era, Standard Oil absorbed the vast majority of refineries in a remarkably short span. Within a decade, Rockefeller's organization dominated refining at a level few industries had ever seen. By the late 1870s, his network controlled an overwhelming share of oil refining capacity, and Rockefeller, still a relatively young man, was sitting at the center of a machine that had become economically and politically significant. But dominance has a price: attention. As Standard Oil's influence expanded, criticism became inevitable. Newspapers and opponents painted Rockefeller as a symbol of monopoly power, an industrial king who played by rules that others couldn't survive. Investigations multiplied. Lawsuits followed. Public hearings became routine. Rockefeller was called to testify again and again as the country began to wrestle with what his kind of corporate power meant. Then, in 1897, he stepped back from day-to-day leadership. There was no dramatic public announcement, no grand farewell. He simply withdrew from operational control, remaining in the role of chairman largely in name, while the machine he built continued to run. The legal and moral storm around this monopoly didn't fade, it sharpened. And in the early 1900s, the most damaging blow didn't come from a rival refinery or a courtroom tactic. It came from a journalist. In 1901, investigative writer Ida Tarbell began a sustained campaign to dissect Rockefeller's rise. Instead of treating him like a distant legend, she treated him like a case file. Installment by installment, she mapped the mechanisms behind Standard Oil's dominance, preferential railroad arrangements, backroom influence, and the systematic swallowing of competitors. The impact was explosive. Public anger surged, and political pressure followed. Criticism didn't stay confined to editorials. Prominent voices condemned Rockefeller openly. President Theodore Roosevelt attacked the logic of corporate overreach and framed Standard Oil as a symbol of law-breaking power. Commentators argued that no ethical person should collaborate with a machine built like this. The Rockefeller name became shorthand for predation. Threats and hate mail piled up. But Tarbell's sharpest move wasn't even about contracts or pricing. It was personal. She dragged Rockefeller's family history back into daylight, his father's double life, accusations, and ugly reputation. Rockefeller's response was not a dramatic rebuttal. It was silence. The same silence he'd learned early. Endure, don't perform, don't feed the spectacle. Then the state finally swung the axe. In 1911, after years of investigations and hearings, the U.S. government delivered its antitrust judgment against Standard Oil. The remedy wasn't a fine or a warning. It was dismemberment. The company was ordered to break apart into more than 30 separate businesses, a forced restructuring meant to end monopoly control. People expected collapse. What happened was the opposite. Once separated, the pieces often became more valuable than the original giant. Investors poured in, stock values surged, and the combined worth of the spin-off companies climbed rapidly. Rockefeller, who still held enormous equity, didn't just survive the breakup. He became even richer because of it. In effect, the antitrust defeat helped cement him as the first modern symbol of extreme American wealth. And just as one era of oil demand began to weaken, another arrived on schedule. Electric lighting reduced reliance on kerosene, threatening a pillar of the old market. Then the automobile exploded into mainstream life. Gasoline became the new fuel king, and the oil businesses, now split into separate entities, found a massive new engine for growth. That wave carried the fortune forward to the next generation. Rockefeller's only son, John D. Rockefeller Jr., was positioned as the heir to the entire structure. Born in 1874, Jr. was raised under strict rules that mirrored the family's creed: track every expense, control impulses, live simply, and give methodically. His childhood wasn't indulgent, it was regimented. And being the sole successor came with pressure heavy enough to break most people. By his late teens, the strain had already taken a toll. In September 1893, he entered Brown University still living like someone with little, carefully recording spending in a ledger, keeping his habits restrained, and trying to carry the weight of a dynasty without showing it on his face. Even so, college independence gave Junior his first taste of doing things that had always been treated as off-limits. He went to plays, tried out the kinds of entertainments his upbringing would have frowned on, and picked up habits he'd never have admitted to at home. More importantly, it was during this period that he met his future wife, Abby Aldrich Rockerfeller, a well-connected young woman from Rhode Island society. After graduating, Junior entered the Standard Oil world in 1897 with a simple ambition: stand beside his father and prove he belonged there. But the reality was deflating. Instead of clear responsibilities, he was given vague busywork, an unfamiliar office, an empty desk, scattered tasks, and no real direction. He didn't feel like an heir in training. He felt like an accessory. Eager to demonstrate competence, he made a reckless move. He plunged into the stock market. It ended badly. After taking advice from a questionable market operator, he lost about $1 million, family money, and expensive humiliation for the only successor to a legendary fortune. Over time, he took on more serious roles inside the broader Rockefeller structure, but a truth became impossible to ignore. Junior wasn't built in his father's image. He didn't have the predator's appetite for conquest, nor the fascination with market domination. If anything, he showed sympathy for opponents and was willing to offer financial exits rather than pursue total destruction. So when the early 1910s brought restructuring and the Standard Oil era entered a new phase, Junior used the moment to step away from direct command. He pivoted toward what he actually cared about: philanthropy and legacy. In 1913, he and his father helped establish the Rockefeller Foundation, backed by an initial endowment of $100 million. The mission was sweeping, improving human welfare on a global scale, and the organization would grow into one of the most influential philanthropic institutions in history. As the anger surrounding Standard Oil cooled and charitable work expanded, Junior aimed for something bigger than donations. He wanted to change what the Rockefeller name meant. Then came the event that threatened to destroy that plan. On April 20th, 1914, gunfire tore through a tent colony in Ludlow, Colorado, where striking miners and their families were living. The mine was tied to Rockefeller ownership, and the confrontation escalated into a disaster. After hours of violence, at least 21 people were dead, including women and children. History would remember it as the Ludlow Massacre, and public rage didn't aim itself at abstract corporate power. It found a human target: John D. Rockefeller Jr. For the first time, the full weight of national condemnation landed directly on him. He was blamed not only for the tragedy itself, but also for the wider brutality people associated with the Rockefeller business model: monopoly tactics, exploitation, and indifference. The pressure was severe enough that he feared for the future of the family name. But out of the ashes, Junior made a decision that changed his trajectory. He went to Colorado himself. He met workers. He listened to families. He engaged directly rather than hiding behind lawyers and statements. That shift, part empathy, part strategy, helped push meaningful changes in labor policy and improved conditions for miners over time. More importantly, Ludlow became the starting line for Junior's long campaign to rehabilitate the Rockefeller legacy. As one historian later argued, if you had told Americans that Rockefeller would one day be associated with public good rather than pure greed, most would have laughed. Junior set out to make it real, through decades of institutional reform and vast giving to medicine, education, and the arts. He didn't erase the past. He tried to outwork it. In 1937, John D. Rockefeller died at 97 at his estate in Florida, closing the first era of the dynasty and leaving behind a name that had become both a warning and, increasingly, a symbol of philanthropy. His funeral was held privately, but with enormous ceremony at the family estate. Across the Standard Oil network, Operations reportedly paused for several minutes, a brief, symbolic halt to acknowledge the man who built the machine. By the 1930s, the Rockefeller name had largely shifted its public face. The next generations leaned hard into philanthropy, culture, museums, universities, and civic projects, less smoke and steel, more institutions and legacy. But not everyone in the family followed that script. The Rockefeller, who chose politics. Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller, Jr.'s second son, born 1908, carried a different kind of ambition. He had the same commanding energy people once associated with his grandfather: big plans, executive instincts, and a hunger for public power. After years of climbing, he reached the top tier: governor of New York and later vice president of the United States. Still, his political story is often remembered with a sense of almost. At one point, he had a real path to become the Republican nominee for president, but personal scandal became political damage. A divorce after decades of marriage, followed by remarriage during a sensitive campaign window, didn't just create gossip. It destroyed trust with the party base and erased momentum. The family came close to the peak of direct national power, but never seized it. Ironically, in the 21st century, another wealthy New York figure would reach the presidency in a way the Rockefellers never did. The rest of Jr.'s children. Influence without elections. While Nelson chased office, other Rockefeller siblings shaped different arenas. Some became known for large-scale giving and international initiatives. Others became patrons of art and culture. One pushed conservation forward as a serious American cause. David Rockefeller became a defining figure in finance, eventually leading Chase Manhattan, turning banking into its own kind of power center. Another entered public life in his own right, becoming a governor as well.
They weren't building a monopoly anymore.
They were building reach through institutions, capital, policy networks, and social influence. A family feud goes public. And then the dynasty did what dynasties always do. It fought itself. As Nelson's political era cooled, he wanted to return and reassert control over the family's direction, something he believed was his role. But John D. Rockefeller III pushed back, determined to hold the center of the family court. The conflict escalated into a public embarrassment when younger family members leaked internal disputes to the press. Later, a book published in the mid-1970s dragged more of the internal dynamics into daylight, describing a household that seemed to have everything except warmth. Nelson, furious about the leaks, attacked the younger generation as reckless and untrustworthy, arguing they couldn't be relied on to steward the family organizations. Time cooled the feud among the younger relatives, but the two central rivals never truly reconciled. John III died in a car accident in 1978. Nelson followed only months later, the Rockefeller name today. In the 21st century, the Rockefellers remain wealthy and connected, but they no longer dominate the American economy the way Standard Oil once did. The family's total fortune is often estimated in the billions, but it's divided across many branches after generations of inheritance and fragmentation. So while the dynasty is still rich, there's no single Rockefeller who stands above the country's modern billionaire class the way John D. once did. Their influence survives in a different form: foundations, investment vehicles, and long-lived institutions, especially organizations focused on health, education, scientific research, and long-term development. Politically, individual family members have still appeared in public roles, but the family's direct grip on power isn't what it was in its golden age. And that's the real arc of the Rockefeller story. They rose from obscurity to build a system that reshaped an entire industry, then spent the next century trying to reshape what their name meant. The empire became a warning label. The legacy became a project. If you want more stories like this, where we dissect how power is built, protected, and transformed, follow the channel. Next time, we'll go even deeper.